Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Glaring headlines. Glaring headlines. Americans budget $5,200 extra dollars just to cover rising prices. That's what the Bloomberg economist said. Yep, it's all, if you listen to conservatives, it's all Joe Biden's fault. Yep, it's all Joe Biden. In fact, someone came up with cute little Joe Bidens pointing at things going, I did that. And you go, gee, who funded that? Who came up with that campaign? Who funded it? Who paid for it all? Gee, I wonder. Corporate America. I wonder what think tank is going to take credit for it. Oh, none of them, because they all operate in secret. But here's the weird thing. There's this little weird juxtaposition of a different headline I came across. One that I thought was kind of interesting because we're all focused on inflation. We're all hit by it. We're all hit by the rising gas prices. We're all hit by the when you go to the supermarket, when you go to buy a new car, we're all feeling the pinch, every one of us. And I have said, look, this is good old-fashioned American greed. This is good old-fashioned corporate America, good old-fashioned opportunism. This is good old-fashioned business doing business. Business Week, their economics. Profits soar as U.S. corporations have best year since 1950. This is the best year corporate America has had since well before I was born, since well before most of us were born. And you go through and you read some of the story. Profits surged 35%, according to data published by the Department of Commerce. And you go, but hold on. I thought there was supposed to be a trickle down. Was that supposed to happen? Or aren't they supposed? No, that doesn't happen. Doesn't trickle down. In fact, in all 4 quarters of last year, you had profit margins that were above 13%, a level that has never. Well, that's never happened before, but 13% has happened in only one other 3-month period over the last 70 years. And to have 4 of those, I think that's pretty impressive. To average that for an entire year, well, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty remarkable. And I think they're doing quite well. Thank you very much. Now you say, but Rick, wages went up, and they admit that. Wages went up 11%. A little bit. 35. I don't know which side of the equation I'd rather be on, the 35% or the 11%, but hey, okay. Wages went up a little bit because, the great reshuffling, they call it, the great resignation as workers are going, screw this. We're tired of working for poverty wages in desperate conditions, so we're going to quit and find somewhere else. But when you look at the numbers, you look at the data, the percentage of profits and the percentage of income that went to wages actually is right in line with pre-pandemic levels. So this idea that somehow, oh my gosh, these increase in wages, it's what's causing the inflation, is really pure bunk, because it's the same basic amount. It's the same percentage. It's the same portion that's being paid out in wages and compensation and benefits. So what else could be going on? Oh yeah, our billionaire class, they're profiting very well. Thank you very much. They're doing good. And look, they're thinking good times ahead as well. 2022, they're looking to as something pretty good, because what they're saying is, according to Fed data, we as Americans, since the end of 2019, we've been kind of squirreling some cash away, putting some nuts away for the rainy day. They argue, and this is what their numbers are showing, that we're sitting on about $4.2 trillion in what they call extra savings. I call it a rainy day fund, because all of us have got to be going, you know, things have been good. Corporate America is heating things up. The Fed's kind of letting things get a little warm. Generally, when you create housing bubbles, generally when you create other things that go on, things go pop. And when things go pop, it's working people who get screwed. And I think the average everyday family is going, I should probably have a little nest egg. This could be part of that. This could be part of it. But what I loved in reading through the Bloomberg article, and this is one of those things that makes me go, they had to put in here that, this kind of economy is good for workers. Because workers, their words were, workers stand to benefit too. Because strong profits lead firms to hire more. And I'm going, is that true? I know it's what we're told fairly consistently. I know it's what we're beaten with on a regular basis. I know it's what we're led to believe. I know, if you go, it's common sense. If they have more money, they're going to hire more people. And you go, yeah, no, it's not really common sense. They'd like us to believe that, but it doesn't really bear out when you stop and logically think about it. The only thing that gets companies to hire more people is more demand. So if people have more money, if workers have higher wages, then yes, I could see that argument. Yes, we have more products going out the door because consumers have so much more money that they demand X, Y, and Z. That I understand. But giving corporations more profits, I don't know. I don't see it, and it hasn't borne fruit over my lifespan. I'm sorry. As the old, as a guest I had on many years ago said, if you give corporate America, $20 million, they're going to go on vacation. If you give them more customers, they're going to hire more workers. And this is where we are. Now, yesterday we talked about ExxonMobil and their profits. Massive profits, enormous profits, record profits. $9.3 billion they put in their pocket for this past quarter. You're gigantic. And you go, gee, I wonder why gas prices are so high. In fact, what they pointed out is that their share prices have jumped 36% to date. And you go, gee, I wonder why gas prices are so high. Oh, that's right. It's Joe Biden's fault. Yeah. No, understand. No, understand. There's a lot at play here because, corporate America is really doing a lot to deflect. We want to take advantage of the supply chain issues and say, no, it's not our bad trade deals. No, it's not the fact that corporate America has abandoned the U.S. for cheap labor and exploitable labor regulations overseas. No, and higher profits for themselves and their shareholders. No, that's not it, Rick. No, it's Joe Biden. It's Joe Biden. It's not the fact that we don't have a real national manufacturing policy that has left us weak and dependent on foreign nations. No, Rick, it's Joe Biden. It's not the fact that, we've had a minimum wage that hasn't been risen in, what is it now, 12, 13 years? No, Rick, it's again, you can sing this in chorus because this is kind of like one of those singbacks. It's Joe Biden. Because this is what the right wants you to believe. This is what corporate America wants you to believe. Everything's Joe Biden's fault. It's the Democrats' fault. Now, what I find interesting is Dean Baker, who I've had on this program a couple of times, great economist, smart guy. He came out and he said what I've said on this program 1,000 times. Had the minimum wage kept up with productivity, he's saying now that minimum wage would be $27 an hour. And you go, oh my God, how could we possibly have a minimum wage of $27 an hour? I don't even make that much. And you go, you're right. You probably don't, because very few Americans do, which is part of the problem. From the late 60s, early 70s till now, that marriage of that meritocracy we were told existed, that as productivity went up, wages went up, and they walked hand in hand. And there's some great graphs out there that show this. The more productivity went up, the more wages went up, and it did. It walked hand in hand. Then right around the mid 70s, it just flatlined, and productivity kept going up at the same 45-degree angle, and wages died. and have been stagnant really ever since. And a big part of that is the fact that labor unions have been under attack ever since. Now, he points out that from 38, when the minimum wage was created, through 68, there's a perfect line. Productivity goes up, wages walk hand in hand with it. And had it kept up with that, $27 an hour. And he goes, look, imagine someone works 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, $27 an hour. That's a little over 56 grand a year. Imagine you got a couple that's working that's over what, 112 grand a year to run a household on. That's an upper middle class living, isn't it, today? And you go, but no, that's impossible. We could never have that. But we used to have people who could make a good living like that. When we had 35% union density, when you had strong unions that were able to demand corporate America to open their books and say, you know what, you made this much profit, we demand a share of the labor, of the wealth that our labor creates. Today, that's been crushed. And what's happened is we've built the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization because there has been a massive and enormous redistribution of wealth. And when anybody talks about taxation, he's going, oh, you want to take from rich people. But we never do I hear anyone ever complain that wages have been crushed for decades. The work that you do, the labor that you do, the way that you support your family has been crushed. You get ripped off every day, and yet I don't hear people complaining about it. Oh, it's the market. It's the market wage. No, nonsense. They have been holding down the quote-unquote market wage for decades. And there's actually a word for it. There's a word. They've come up with a word for corporate power holding down wages. Because economists already know this stuff. And this is why I like Dean Baker. Because he comes out and he says what is. The fact that 62% of Americans in the last Pew poll said the minimum wage should go up to $15 an hour. And I'm going, $15 an hour? Okay, fine. That's about 32 grand a year? Still not getting you what you're worth. And at some point, maybe we'll demand this. I look at UPS. UPS is an extraordinarily profitable company, unionized company. Their unionized workers their full-time workers make really good money. They just went and screwed over their part-time workers just recently. Hired a bunch of them in, $24 an hour. Said, this is what you're going to be making. And then they just said, well, the contract says 15. And they've taken that money back from them. Now the union's fighting it, and good for them. They should be. But the $10.9 billion they made last quarter, the fourth quarter of last year, where'd that go? Now, that's after they paid superior wages to their drivers. That's after they paid their CEO an enormous amount of money. Where'd that money go? Oh, that's right. It was doled out to the ownership class. And who made that money? Oh, yeah, those workers who were working 12, 14 hours a day. Those people who were constantly under the gun, constantly under the clock. In a highly unionized environment. This is the problem I have where we are. We don't think enough of ourselves. We don't demand enough for ourselves. And somehow we think those people at the top, who the hardest day's work they do is shuffling money out of our pockets and into theirs, that they deserve it and we don't. When we're the ones who create the wealth that they enjoy. And yet somehow they believe they're entitled to it and we don't. How weird and messed up is that? Love to hear your thoughts on it. Do you find it as odd as I do? Do you find it as frustrating? Because I love the idea of a meritocracy. I love the idea that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. That if you produce, you earn, you do well. That ain't how it is. Even, no matter how much we want and we wish, ain't it? If you're just joining us, grab the podcast wherever you get your podcasts or the ricksmithshow.com. Do that. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Let the crazy begin. Oh, my goodness. Marjorie 3 names. My friend Rich Ojeda loves to call her Marjorie Trader Green, Trainwreck Green, whatever you're going to call the poor woman. But evidently to her, pedophile is the new liberal, the new socialist, whatever default the cons are using to call people of sanity. But she not happy with Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, Susan Collins, the senator from Maine, and Mitt Romney, the senator from Utah. No, because those 3 have come out and said that they're going to support Ketanji Brown Jackson to sit on the Supreme Court. And look, nobody said that she's not qualified. This is the weird part of this. She's enormously qualified. No one, but according to Marjorie 3 names, the 3 of those, Murkowski, Collins, and Mittens, they are pro-pedophile. That's it, because they're going to vote for the black woman on the Supreme Court. That makes them somehow, and I'm still trying to figure this one out, makes them pro-pedophile. And look, if you've got no other argument, just make stuff up. I guess that's the part of it. Now, Tom Cotton, he's gone a different direction. I guess pedophile on one hand. Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, has gone the other direction in talking about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. He said, quote, "The last Judge Jackson left the Supreme Court to go to Nuremberg to prosecute the case against the Nazis. This Judge Jackson might have gone there to defend them." And I sat and I thought about this, and I'm going, coming from Tom Cotton, really? Tom? Seriously? Okay. But this idea that people don't deserve a defense is something that the right really takes the soul. And one of the things I think is most important about our Constitution and our way of government and our legal system is that no matter how heinous your crime, no matter how much I may think you're a treasonous, seditious, no good for nothing scumbag, think January 6th and all those people, and I still think you have the right to a vigorous defense and the right to have your day in court. Evidently, Senator Cotton doesn't. Someone who has put his hand on the Bible and swore to uphold and defend that Constitution that gives people the right to their day in court. Evidently, he's not there. So I see this as one of these things where he's, this is supposed to be an insult. This is supposed to be something that we're supposed to be, that's bad. I see it as a positive. As I've said 1,000 times, one of my favorite presidents throughout history has been John Adams. Not because I think he was a particularly good president, but for 2 reasons. First and foremost, he lost and he left. I think that's notable. The first time in the history of recorded civilization that you had a bloodless ideological shift in power. Pretty important. Jefferson won. Now, granted, he sulked away and did not happily turn over power. He did sulk away, but he did not He did not try and overthrow, Jefferson and our government to hold on to the reins. And the other thing is, he defended the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre, and I might add, got him off because he was a pretty skilled attorney. But even they deserved their day in court. One of the founding tenets of our country. It's a shame Senator Cotton doesn't believe in that. Now, the weird part about this whole thing with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is evidently she's going to have to wait a couple of months before she's actually seated on the court. And it's, I guess, like 3 months. I was kind of under the impression that as soon as this was over, that there would be a nice little party and say, oh, hey, thanks, Stephen. You did a great job. Pat on the back, rub on the head, whatever that is. Move them along, get them a nice chair, an Afghan, whatever it is they do, and move right along. Evidently, it's going to be about 3 months before that spot. And they're saying it's an unusually long delay. And I kind of think it seems kind of long. Now, good for Stephen, good for the outgoing justice, Stephen Breyer. He didn't die. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing for him. File this under too much of the F channel. Too much Fox channel will rot your brain. Evidently a new report out that shows that the murder rates in red states much, much higher than in blue states. The Yahoo News reported that Republican politicians, routinely go after Democratic-run cities. It's just a crime everywhere. It's just crime-riddled cities run by Democrats who don't know how to do anything. But evidently, this new study shows that the murder rates are actually higher in states and cities controlled by Republicans. Gee, who'd have known that? The study found that the murder rates in 25 states. In the 25 states Donald Trump carried in 2020 are 40% higher overall than the states that Joe Biden won. And again, they're not going to believe it because it's in writing. Because I had one of these Facebook things today. Someone said, you got to do your research. And I said, send me a reading list of all the things that you read. Show me your research list. I want your research list. Send me what it is you read. And you know what? You got to know what they sent me. It was a Tucker Carlson video. And I'm going, this is exactly it. This is exactly why you're stupid. You have to learn to read, learn to critically think. And until then, leave the rest of us alone. I know sitting on the toilet with your mouth open, looking at failed Truth Social videos and whatever gab or whatever, right-wing babble or rabble or robble or whatever it is that you're doing, save the rest of us the hassle. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Does this make sense to you? It does to me, because, these are folks who think the wild, wild west was everyone walking around with guns, taking justice into their own hands. So it's not really all that surprising to me. Not surprising at all. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Remember, grab the podcast. ricksmithshow.com is where you get it, or wherever you get your podcast, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, everywhere in between. Wherever you get them, it's there. And I hear it's fabulous. Quick break. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2010. That was the day an explosion in the Upper Big Branch mine killed 29 miners. This is the second of 2 parts commemorating that disastrous moment in labor history. The accumulation of explosive methane gas was so pronounced that the mine had to be evacuated several times leading up to the disaster. A 126-page Governor's Independent Investigation Panel report detailed the systemic failures of safety systems and at governmental agencies charged with enforcing regulation. Lack of proper ventilation, adherence to rock dusting standards, and proper maintenance of machinery were main factors. The panel also held the Mine Safety and Health Administration responsible for disregarding the documented risk of methane outbursts at the mine, overlooking the deadly potential of a precarious ventilation system, neglecting to use its regulatory authority to force technological improvements, and allowing the U.S. mine safety system to atrophy. They determined that MSHA could have issued flagrant violation citations and had the authority to shut the mines down, but didn't. The report noted the cozy relations between mine owners, politicians, judges, and regulators. Specifically, the ease with which state mine officials move from employment with industry to government and back. Despised union-busting CEO Don Blankenship, who was tried and convicted to 1 year in jail, insisted his mines were safe. He cited 3 Sentinels of Safety Awards received from MSHA in 2009. These awards went to surface mining and coal processing plant operations. Blankenship even blamed MSHA for the explosion because the agency demanded changes in UBB's ventilation system. A union safety committee could have shut the mine down before methane gas and coal dust combined to cause the explosion, if only there had been a union.
As we know, government ethics can be a very slippery concept. That's why we the people have insisted that every public official, from Congress critters to dog catchers, swear to abide by some minimum standard of proper behavior. Not that all will honor it, but a code of ethics provides a measure of legal action against those who are grabbers and grifters. How bizarre, then, that the 9 members of our august Supreme Court, America's highest legal authority, have discreetly refused to apply ethical rules to themselves, claiming that their group don't need no stinking code because, well, they are supreme. Chief Justice John Roberts himself assures us that each justice will always make the right ethical call because, quote, they are jurists of exceptional integrity and experience. Does he think we have sucker wrappers around our heads? Some of these black-robed honorables regularly engage in petty thievery, taking corporate-funded junkets to luxury resorts, getting free membership in exclusive golf clubs, and accepting assorted gifts from special interests. Clarence Thomas is the current king of handouts, taking thousands of dollars in freebies, including such pedestrian gimmies as car tires and cigars. Thomas, a 31-year lifer on the court, draws $230,000 a year from taxpayers. Can't he buy his own cigars? No one would buy stuff for him except to influence his decisions. Most damning, though, is the grand larceny of the court's 6 right-wing extremists who've turned what's meant to be a citadel of democracy into a Republican rubber stamp for plutocracy. They've stolen the integrity of the court itself, rigging their procedures and rulings to profit moneyed interests, suppress voting rights, hog-tie workers, and generally run roughshod over the needs and democratic ideals of America's majority. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help stop this, go to fixthecourt.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've had some pretty good job numbers here as of recent, I don't know, for the last, 14 months, 15 months, ever since the new guy, and I know everyone loves it was such a great economy under the former guy. Things were so much better under the former guy, except for the jobs numbers, except we lost, a lot of jobs. And, we're almost back to pre-pandemic employment levels. And again, I think the guy in the White House deserves a little credit for that. In fact, we're growing some manufacturing jobs. I think we're on the right track. Here to share some thoughts on the job numbers and what that means, and then some of the policy that's moving us in that direction. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be with you tonight.
So I'm looking at the job numbers. I mean, this last month, fantastic numbers, I think, 431,000 jobs in the month of March, 38,000 of those manufacturing. I'd like to see more, but it's not bad.
That's 38,000 manufacturing jobs a month is a really great total, I will say. And to put it into context, and I think this is important, Um, we have, we've been in recessions, every so often, 5 or 10 years, 5 or 10 years we get into a recession. Inevitably, what's happened is that we've lost manufacturing jobs and we haven't gained them all back. Okay. This has happened in every recession we've seen since the 1970s. And we'll gain other jobs back, but they're usually replacing manufacturing jobs for lower paying service jobs. Okay. This is part of the reason why we've had a lot of economic hiccups and difficulties over the past generation of workers, really.
Right.
Well, as at this rate of job growth, Biden could very well be the first president under which manufacturing jobs fully recover from a recession. And I think it's going to happen in the next couple of months. And obviously, I don't expect ticker tape parades around the country or anything like that. But I think it's really notable. And I think it's notable for a couple of reasons, because these are well-paying jobs. And particularly when they're union manufacturing jobs, they come with a good set of benefits. And all of that together means that there's more income in the community to go around, which means there's more jobs supported. Okay. And so this is like, it's a virtuous cycle. And it also means that we're making more of the stuff that we need right here at home, and that his policies are in fact working. And the idea that, well, we're never going to get the jobs back from China, or that robots are going to take them all, that we can kind of wash those away with yesterday's news. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I mean, we still have a long way to go, but boy, are we on the right track. And I'm pretty optimistic about what the future holds, Rick.
Yeah, arrows are pointing in the right direction, and that's a good thing. Now, to your point that, every recession we lose manufacturing jobs, and those are always replaced with lower paying service sector jobs. And that has been, that's been for decades. That's nothing new. And I think every community across this country knows that. Every politician loves to throw out, we've lost 70,000 factories of more than 500 employees since 2000. That is not in dispute. Everyone knows that. And I think that's a lot of the reason why so many people are so angry, and a lot of communities are broken. You go across this country and you see hollowed out shells of communities where, they're broken, and there's been nothing to replace what was that manufacturing base, what was the heart and soul of communities. I'm sorry, a McDonald's or a Wendy's or a Walmart is not going to replace that manufacturing plant that was there for 100 years, that generations found pride and self-image in, and their community identity. And I'm sorry, that's just not going to do it. And I think we need to be thinking about how we rebuild that.
That's exactly right. And to be clear, I'm sure I know I want service jobs to have dignity, and to be well paying. But where we are right now in our economy, manufacturing jobs, in part because of the productivity and the skills and training required, tend to pay a little better. And again, that means that, like, I'm trying to think the way to put this, like if you're in a community and you get a factory in your town, you're going to get a bunch of other businesses that are going to come and co-locate there, right? Either suppliers to that factory, or other, or taverns or hardware stores or something else, because there's going to be more money circulating in that community. You get a dollar store coming to your community, that's it. I mean, you're not gonna get anything else that comes along with that. And so I think that's one of the important things about this. And so I'm very pleased that Biden has had a focus on this in a real way, with respect to automobiles, and infrastructure, and clean energy, and on other industries that we can build up, that will provide some of those family supporting jobs. And I see the evidence. I mean, this isn't just the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers talking. We've seen, and we've talked about this, factory openings that have been announced in many different parts of the country. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't places shutting down. There certainly are, but it's a two-way street instead of a one-way street now. And I think that, again, I take that as a good sign, something that we need to build on.
Yeah, no, I've said this a million times. I'll say it a million more times over the years, over the coming years. Every job is worthy of dignity and respect. Every job is worthy of a living wage, health security, retirement security, and a voice on the job. That goes without question. But to your point,
Absolutely.
the reality is if you have a value added, job like a manufacturing job where you're taking raw materials and it's clearly going to have more profit motives, going to have more income, clearly going to generate more activity, feeder plants coming in. That's the kind of thing that we built this country on, and sadly, it's not been lost. We know exactly where we allowed it to go. It's a matter of getting it back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. You can check out the amazing work that they do promoting American manufacturing and American jobs. Now, the president is really hot and heavy on electric vehicles and the battery technology and really now talking about getting to the metals that we need to do this, because we've been talking about okay, you're gonna have these plants. We're so dependent on China. We're so dependent on everyone else, and I think what's going on with the pandemic and now with Russia, and of course our problems with China, I think, at least I hope, we're finally becoming awakened to the reality that we better figure out how to deal with this stuff on our own and become independent on a lot of different venues. I'm pretty happy that the president's at least on that track.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, just within the last week or so, he's invoked a law called the Defense Production Act, which dates back to the beginning of the Cold War, basically 1950s, and the act is basically the federal government saying to the private sector, "We need you to do more of this," and sometimes it can be very directive. And sometimes it can be based on incentives, and this particular application is based on incentives. Like, we're going to have $750 million out there for startup companies that want to mine and process lithium and cobalt and other critical minerals that we need for our electronics, for our batteries, for our technology. Because right now we for a while we didn't even have one working mine in the United States that was where we could procure this. And there's one that has stood up, but the vast majority of this comes from either production that's in terrible conditions, by the way, and mostly managed by Chinese companies in some African countries, or it's coming from China or from Russia, and that seems like a really bad bet as we look ahead into the decades. And so, if we do want that electric vehicle future built in America, and I know some people aren't ready for it yet, but I imagine a decade from now, we're going to all take this for granted, right? And the only question is going to be, where are all these things going to be made? Where are all these things going to be made? They're going to be made in China. They're going to be made in Japan. They're going to be made in the United States. And if we have those industries in the United States and the minerals, we have a fighting chance to have a larger battery industry here and some technology industries that we can reshore. And I think, again, from a security perspective, that's important. From a jobs perspective, that's important. And just talking about what our economic future looks like. I don't think people want to trade foreign oil for made in China batteries, basically, or solar panels. And so having a strategy like this and invoking the Defense Production Act, I think is a good first step that again, we can build on to help incubate some of these industries in the United States.
Yeah, it's something we desperately need. And one of the things that I like about it, and again, the thing that I like about Joe Biden the most is the fact that, whatever he's doing, he's talking about how are we making workers' lives better? When we do these things, how do we include some language in there that's raising conditions? And this is something we've talked about numerous times over the years, that you use federal dollars to raise the floor, to raise conditions, to make things better, to demand that we take the high road instead of race to the bottom kind of bidding where the lowest bid wins. But we're actually using our investments not just to get the things what we need, but also to build the broader economy to make things better for everybody across the spectrum.
Amen. And I think this is something that has been sorely missed here. And I think that if we're using those federal incentives, whether it's tax incentives or grants or loans, that having them tied to expectations for corporate behavior are important, and that means neutrality when it comes to organizing efforts, and it means paying a prevailing or a living wage, as the case may be, and it means other sorts of good employer practices as well, because encouraging a race to the bottom will lead us nowhere. And we've seen what happens is that, yeah, a company may decide to set up shop in the United States, but eventually, if it gets a better deal, it's going to leave in a hurry, right? And it's not going to be a real stakeholder in the community. So having a model of building new industries and doing it the right way, I think has promise. And unfortunately, the biggest obstacle to all of this, Rick, is going to be corporate behavior. And the fact that, do we really have to do this? Like, do we really have to think about reshoring our supply chains from China? Do we really have to stop using forced labor coming from Xinjiang and Uyghur forced labor camps?
Yes, we do, Scott. Yes, because again, cheap labor and lax environmental regulations is heroin to a CEO. It's more. It's their greed factor. We got to have more. And look, if you give them the choice, they're going to take it every time, because they got shareholders to make happy. They've got profit motives to make, because they're not going to share it with the workers. We've seen that. We've talked about that. But this is why I think you need to have policy, and you need to have your carrots and sticks, man. And when they do the right thing, we pat them on the back, give them a carrot. When they do the wrong thing, well, you got to go to the stick.
Exactly. I think it's a very good thing to have guardrails on capitalism, because I think that when we do things right, we can do them great and everybody can benefit. And we've seen how that's worked. But if we just let it go awry, we've also seen what the end result of that is, that, there is no limit to how low you can go.
Yep.
As well, whether it's exploiting the environment or exploiting workers or taking advantage of taxpayers. And so reclaiming some of that, I think, is important. And as we're building new industries, that's the opportunity, particularly because these companies want to look good in the public image. And some of them really even want to do the right thing. And so I think that's a potent combination. And I'm glad that Biden is insisting on this.
Yep. And again, one of the things I love about the president is "Made in America" is his slogan, and we need to get back to that, and in a big way. And finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on really what I'm thrilled to see, because finding clothing in this country that are made in America is really it's too difficult. It's a Herculean leap to find anything, let alone a pair of blue jeans, which, when I was a kid, during the height of the Cold War, American blue jeans were like gold. It was like currency that you could trade internationally. And in my lifetime, they've almost all gone away, except for evidently Wrangler has this very popular Rooted collection, which, well, I got to give them props. At least they're trying.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Rick, I don't think you or I are in the demographic that's willing to pay like $300 for a pair of jeans that has more rips and holes in it than actual material. But there's many of those that are made in America, but they cost $300.
That's not me.
They're not meant for me. They're probably not meant for you. I don't want to speak for you, but and make assumptions. But Wrangler is a brand, I mean, that people know, and so often we talk about where to find made in America stuff, and it's like, here we go. Now, okay. Not every Wrangler jean is made in America, okay? I will just say that. But the fact that they have a line and they're expanding it and they're sourcing the cotton and everything else from the U.S., and T-shirts to go along with it, by the way, too, is cool. And it tells a story. Like, they can point to like 13 states and the farms where they're getting their source material from. Again, instead of like the Uyghur forced labor in Xinjiang, where a lot of the cotton for textiles and fabric comes from. So I think that it is really cool. And so, yeah, my hat's off to Wrangler for believing in that, for doing it, and for knowing that they can even make some money that way,
Yep.
which is great. It's great to see a brand like Wrangler doing that.
No, it's important that we have the option. And this is one of those things that, look, I want to have the option. You walk into too many stores and you have no options. Because the American-made options have all been crushed because, hey, corporate America wants to make the most profit they can because, again, it's all about the heroin, cheap labor, and lax environmental regulations. But, Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, keep up the amazing work that you guys do.
All right. You do the same. Thanks for having me on, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their website, americanmanufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can check out the stuff they do there. Love to hear your thoughts. Would you buy American-made jeans? Of course you would. Who wouldn't? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that the United Mine Workers of America called for a strike against the Pittston Coal Company. Negotiation with the miners who worked in Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky had drug on for 14 months. The company had canceled health care for retired miners, along with miners with disabilities and widows, and also was not paying previously agreed to payments into a retiree benefit fund. 2,000 miners walked out of the mines and onto the picket lines. The company brought in replacement workers. The union was committed to peaceful protest, but the strike also drew a large number of other miners to the cause who supported the strike in wildcat actions. As many as 40,000 wildcat miners walked the lines in support of the strike. Angered over the use of scab labor, some of these picketers participated in actions like using jack rocks, a line of nails welded together to puncture the tires of company vehicles. In all, 4,000 people were arrested during the strike. The strike stretched on from days to weeks to months. At the time of the strike, current AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka was president of the United Mine Workers. When a newspaper reporter asked him how long the workers could hold out on the strike, he responded, 1 day longer than Pittston. Many friends from labor came to Appalachia to support the strike, including famed farm labor activist Cesar Chavez. A nearby campground became known as Camp Solidarity as a base for these friends. Women supporters formed a group called the Daughters of Mother Jones and staged support actions, including a 36-hour sit-in at the Pittston Coal headquarters. The strike ended in February of 1990, with the miners winning some, but not all, of their demands.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I gotta say, I love the idea of American-made jeans. If we could get more of them, and no, I'm not buying $300 ones that are all ripped up. I can rip them up on myself. Thank you very much. But yeah, I mean, the sad reality is we've lost most of that manufacturing, and I know people say, no, nobody wants to do those jobs. Nonsense. Nobody wants to do those jobs in sweatshop conditions for poverty wages. That's the reality. So some interesting news today. Ivanka Trump sat before the select committee today. 8 hours she testified behind closed doors. And this is where I'm going, I want to see that. I want to see the testimony. Why can't I see this? She wasn't subpoenaed. She came in on her own, according to Representative Benny Thompson. Again, I want to see it. I want to see the testimony. Now, they're saying over the summer they're going to hold, the hearings. And again, I still think we need to be hammering through this stuff a lot more. They have now said that the select committee, Benny Thompson and folks, that they will not subpoena Mike Pence. And I got to be honest, I think I want Mike Pence there. I just want somebody to go, how does it feel to know that they were going to hang you? That had Trump pushed you out into the crowd, that the faithful were going to hang you right there because you wouldn't break the law. How do you feel about those folks? Now, of course, clearly, he's not going to tell the truth. Clearly, because he seems to think that he's going to be president. Yeah, that's going to happen. But here's the thing, and this is where Democrats, you got to get out there and you got to talk to your friends, neighbors. I know we're preoccupied with what's going on with the prices and inflation and stuff. I know that. I know we're tired about all of the talk of COVID and everything. I know it's hard to get excited in this moment about what's going on politically. But I'll tell you, I think Joe Biden is doing a good job. I think he came in with a total mess, with zero transition time. It was a good thing that he had some experience. Built an infrastructure, got the vaccines out, got the country vaccinated, moved us in a direction where there's some mistakes. Sure, there always are. But I'm not going to blame him for that. Now, has he delivered on absolutely every promise? No. Was he ever going to? No, he was not going to be able to. Not in a 50-50 Senate. But I'm not going to beat him up for all of that because we've got Joe Manchin and 50 Republicans. Put the ire where it belongs. And this is where Democrats stop beating up inward. I'll do enough of that for all of us. The Republicans are the cause of a lot of our problems right now. There are 50 Senate Republicans who will not give a vote on anything that's going to make our economy better. We need the Build Back Better plan. We do, desperately. We need to invest in the future. They're not going to support it. Which is why come this November, we need to get out in large numbers, in presidential election year numbers, and give Biden the kind of Senate and the kind of House that's going to pass an agenda that's going to give him the opportunity to get some stuff done. And look, what's going on with the January 6th Commission, I'm as frustrated as anyone. There should be more perp walks every day. These hearings, these meetings, this stuff should be more public. Because I'm going, okay, well, what did Ivanka say? What was this big meeting about? What did you behind closed doors? That's no way to run this. We should be finding out what's going on. We should be abreast of the situation, and they should be keeping us up on what's going on. Because I think in DC, I think it's easy to be caught in that bubble. The rest of us want answers. The rest of us want to know that there's some accountability left. And that the people who are doing our bidding, are doing the work that we sent them to do, are doing that. There's a lot that needs to be done, I'll tell you. But remember, we got a historic infrastructure bill passed. Things are going to get better. Work is going to get done. Is it enough? No, it's not enough. It was never going to be enough. But it's a huge first step. It's going to move us forward. He needs help, though. And as much as I like Joe, and understand, and I've said this before, he wasn't my first choice. But right now, he's the guy. And anybody rooting for his failure, anyone rooting against him is rooting against our country. Anyone rooting against him in this moment is rooting against the future of this nation. I did not root against Donald Trump. I knew he was going to be a failure. I knew he was going to be dangerous, and he was, but I never rooted against him. And anyone who does, well, they're rooting against our nation. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment of the program. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And also you can share with your friends, neighbors, co-workers, and maybe even some of those folks. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Quick break, right back.
We are on a fast track to climate disaster.
UN report warns stopping climate change is possible. We have all the tools we need, but time is running out. Plus, U.S. West careens between intense fires and floods, and it's going to get worse.
Oh, if someone had only warned us. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Today, Is the government fixing the price on insulin? What's next? Gas?
Yes, please fix the price on gas, Congressman Kathy McMorris Rogers of Washington. Yes, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know whenever I see the headline, new report from UN says, the rest of that headline is not going to be good.
Yeah, generally it is not. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change on Monday published its latest global assessment of climate science, the third installment of this round. This report on mitigation warns that stopping climate change is still doable, but the window of action to avoid irreversible damage is rapidly closing, and there is little margin for error. But the IPCC reports that the good news is we can do it quickly and relatively cheaply. The most important takeaway is that we have the solutions, but the only thing preventing us from taking advantage of those solutions is the political will, and that is being stopped by powerful fossil fuel interests.
Yes, it is, and it's being stopped by the politicians who are paid by those powerful fossil fuel interests.
The science, not surprisingly, is not great. The report warns countries are far too slow in cutting emissions. The world is now on track to blow past Paris Climate Agreement targets by 2030, and without action could hit a catastrophic 3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels or more.
Well, why worry?
Well, scientists say going beyond the agreed limit of warming no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius means that the dangers of global warming, like worsening extreme weather disasters and ecosystem collapse, could become irreversible and trigger cascading impacts. Humans have already heated the planet by 1.1 degrees Celsius, and in a statement, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres slammed rich countries for failing to act, saying this report
is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. We are on a fast track to climate disaster. Major cities underwater, unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, widespread water shortages, the extinction of 1 million species of plants and animals. And this is not fiction or exaggeration. It is what science tells us will result from our current energy policies.
Fakest accent I've ever heard.
Now, this IPCC report focuses on mitigation. It finds the world has made progress thanks to the plunging costs of renewable energy, which is now cheaper than fossil fuels, and with an all-hands-on-deck approach and immediate drastic deployment of tools and technologies we already have, there is still time, barely, to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. The report is a blueprint for mitigation, what nations need to do. The IPCC lays out literally hundreds of specific strategies that fall under 6 main pathways to curb emissions. Ramp up renewable energy and ditch fossil fuels, make buildings more efficient, transition quickly to electric vehicles, design and upgrade cities to be clean and green using simple urban planning measures and building practices to give people more transportation choices, invest in a just transition for developing countries, adopt regenerative farming practices to store carbon, and protect and restore nature to expand nature's ability to draw down carbon from the air.
In other words, there's plenty of ways to do this. All we are lacking is the will to do this.
Exactly. The IPCC report finds that all of these strategies are not only achievable, but also relatively cheap, since action is far, far cheaper than catastrophe. We have all the tools we need, except the political will.
Well, the difference is, it may be cheaper to take action now, but that means the fossil fuel companies don't make money now. It'll be more expensive later, and that will be paid by the taxpayers.
Exactly. Finally, an example of how costly global warming already is, the deepening mega drought across the western U.S. is affecting crops in California. Water managers announced that despite recent storms, the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains that supplies the state's farms has abruptly melted to the lowest levels in 70 years. A different study warns the U.S. West will be more frequently hit by the 1-2 punch of massive wildfires followed by torrential downpours, causing floods and landslides. Burning fossil fuels is making the destructive cycle of more intense fire and rain more frequent and more costly, and it's going to get worse.
Why worry? It's only going to be 93 degrees in Southern California this week, in April. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, some good news today. The Biden administration says that they're planning on freezing federal student loan payments through the end of August, which that will extend the moratorium that's allowed millions of Americans to hold off on their student loan payments during the pandemic. I'm still waiting for him to do something on the on doing something with the whole system. And I've advocated for a system where the federal government just buys them up and at 0% interest allows people to pay back what you borrowed. That seems fair to me. I know a lot of people want debt forgiveness. I think that would. I think you're going to cause intergenerational jealousy and chaos. I think, look, you took out a loan for 10 grand, you pay the 10 grand back. This idea that you're in debt forever, paying massive amounts of interest, and lining corporations' pockets, nope, not that whole skin in the game nonsense argument. Nope. We got to fix how we fund higher ed as well. Lots there to do. But now I want to talk about the Rick Scott plan. Remember, I said yesterday, right now, Republicans have they're going to do nothing, or they're going to do something really horrible. So you got two options: we're going to do nothing, or we're going to do something really bad. And as someone pointed out, Mitch McConnell has said, "Well, we're going to do nothing for now, but if you elect us, we'll probably do something really horrible. But we're just not going to tell you until we do it." Rick Scott at least is telling us, "Hey, we're going to do a bunch of horrible stuff, and here it is." But we're going to couch it in flags and jingoism and of course, lots of God. I'm here to share some thoughts on just how bad the Rick Scott 11-point plan is. I've asked Seth Hanlon to come talk with us. Seth is a senior fellow for economics over at the Center for American Progress, americanprogress.org, the website if you want to check out the work that they do. Seth, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure. Yeah, good to be back, Rick.
So looking at the grand 11-point plan, one of the things that clearly jumps out at me is, well, two things. One, we're going to tax poor people, which we'll get to that in a minute. But the other thing is every federal program, every law, every rule, everything that we do, sunset in 5 years with the hope that maybe possibly out of the goodness of our heart, we'll figure out how to come to an agreement and, well, do something out. So Granny, sorry, no Social Security. Granny, Medicare, you're gone. Medicaid, gone. The farm program, which means no food stamps for poor folks, gone. All that stuff just gone. But that seems to be the plan.
Yeah, and I think you can go on and on and on. I mean, I guess it's hard to really know what kind of angle to come at this. I mean, it's such a loopy idea. But I think the main thing is, these Republicans have always wanted to cut these programs. And so every time there's like a kind of choke point in the legislative process, like the debt ceiling or something, or they use that as an opportunity to slash these programs. And so he's just sort of putting on paper, I think, what the strategy has always been, which is hold these programs hostage for cuts or for other other Republican priorities. But the most immediate consequences of that would be 70 million people losing their Social Security benefits, which comprise about half their income for about half of them. Tens of millions of people losing their health insurance, and it goes on and on.
Now, the weird thing is I've had conservatives, I've had Republican friends tell me this is a good idea, that they believe ideologically the government shouldn't do any of these things, and that if these were truly good ideas, that the people would rise up and we would fight for these things and we would get politicians. I know this sounds laughable because there are really popular things that we the people really want, that overwhelmingly poll well, that we don't get. But this is what seems to be percolating in right-wing circles, that we should do away with all this stuff, and every couple of years, we should reauthorize it, because to them somehow it sounds appealing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little like nihilism here, just sort of tearing it all down. Yeah, I mean, I think that if anybody has confidence in Congress to renew things, they haven't been paying much attention lately. I mean, it's impossible to get even the most, even the sort of easiest and most, you'd think the most popular things done. I mean, we've seen just avoiding the United States defaulting on its debt. It's like everyone agrees on it, and yet every single time the Republicans try to use it for leverage. The Voting Rights Act, I mean, that's something that was like overwhelmingly, sort of ingrained into our history and our system, and that's constant, that has to be reauthorized. I mean, because that is only authorized for 5 years or so at a time, and then every time Republicans are holding it hostage, and very popular things have expired, like the Violence Against Women Act was out of law for a while because Congress just simply failed to get their act together and pass it again, even though, obviously, if you ask any member of Congress, they're going to say they're for the Violence Against Women Act.
Yeah, and the thing is what I don't think most working class people understand is, corporate America is going to get what they want. The tax breaks for corporations, all the special goodies they got, because they got lobbyists to make sure that they usher this stuff through. It's the stuff that we the people need. It's the stuff that average everyday, Joe Sixpack and and work, the ham and eggers, the folks like that need, that are going to go unaddressed, kind of like it is now.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think well, I guess we'll get to this, but he says, you can sort of see right through what he's saying with the tax, with the tax proposal to tax, where he says, everyone should have skin in the game, and then he claims to be wanting to close loopholes, so that the rich pay taxes, and then President Biden comes out and proposed a billionaire's minimum tax, and well, he's against that, of course, so.
Well, everyone should have skin in the game, Seth, except for Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that for a second, because there is this frame that, these poor people, they don't, these 47%, to use Mitt Romney's number from the 2012 election, these 47% of scofflaws who refuse to pay federal taxes, which I argue these 47% of people would love to pay federal income tax. And I said last night that I have a solution. I have a solution to this horrible, tragic problem of 47% of people not paying the federal minimum wage. And I like what Dean Baker said. Dean Baker said the minimum wage should be $27 an hour. I say we raise the minimum wage up to $27 an hour, so these folks can pay the federal minimum wage, can pay the federal taxes.
Sure. I mean, that'll do it. But yeah, I think you put the pin on it. People aren't, the large share of people who aren't paying taxes are, it's simply because they have no income, or they have extremely low incomes, and that just falls so low it's below the standard deduction. But and that's working people. But of course, Senator Scott's plan would also hit seniors, most of whom won't owe federal income taxes in any given year. Students, other disabled Americans, and and others. So yeah, it hits and mostly hits. I mean, the biggest impact is on low income workers with children. So we had done a column looking at numbers from the Tax Policy Center, and basically households with children making less than $50,000 would pay more than $4,500 per year in additional taxes under Senator Scott's plan. So that's the people that actually hits hardest is low-income families with children.
Yeah, now these are the same people who tell us, anytime we talk about tax increases on the wealthy, it's massive redistribution of wealth. But when we're talking about taxing poor single mothers, it's skin in the game. I love how they frame. I love the framing. It's very interesting.
Right. I mean, as if people don't have skin in the game, right? I mean, I think it's like, so first of all, it's like sort of objectionable to begin with to define, whether somebody has skin in the game or stake in society or contributes to society by how much tax they paid. I mean, that's not the end all and be all. But the bottom line is every single American pays taxes. People pay sales taxes. People pay payroll. Workers pay payroll taxes. Most workers pay more payroll taxes than they do in income taxes. And there's so there's plenty of workers that pay payroll taxes but not income taxes. And Senator Scott would raise their taxes because he'd make them pay income taxes as well. So it's just, I mean, I don't know, the idea that Americans don't have skin in the game, I think is just, I mean, it's just sort of the epitome of being out of touch, especially coming from a guy like Rick Scott.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Seth Hanlon. Seth is Senior Fellow for Economics. They're at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website, if you want to check out the work that they're doing. It's quite amazing where we are right now. If you look around, we're talking about, inflation, which is high, and I think a lot of people are being hurt by it. And as I started today's program off talking about, inflation is pretty high. But you look at the headlines that I pointed out. You saw Bloomberg pointing out Americans should budget an extra $5,200 this year to cover rising prices. And then over at Business Week, you saw the other side of it. Profits soar as U.S. corporations have best year since 1950. And we find out that they averaged over 13% profit last year, which has only happened in one quarter in the last 70 years. So things are doing really well for those folks in corporate America, and you wonder why. Well, the ham and eggers are suffering, and somehow it's Joe Biden's fault. I mean, that's the part that I look at this calculus, and look, I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I don't know how you go from inflation's high, corporate America's profits are through the roof. It's Joe Biden's fault. I missed that roadmap.
Yeah, I mean, I think inflation, and you look at other countries, right? Like it sort of like shows how it's not Joe Biden's fault because Joe Biden obviously isn't responsible for inflation in Spain and England and other countries where it's also high.
So you say?
What's that? Sorry.
So you say?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, but it, obviously it's not, we're not denying, no one is denying. A lot of Republicans are sort of saying, Democrats are just in denial about inflation, and that's not the case at all. I mean, I think people, inflation is a serious issue. I mean, it really is affecting families, and it affects families with the lowest income proportionally the most. So it's an extremely serious problem. But it's not Joe Biden's fault, and he's the one who's doing things to bring it down and address it, both by taking on some of the concentration, sort of corporate concentration and monopolies, like in the meat industry, that keep prices high, but then also trying to help families afford the basics, childcare, and things like the child tax credit, which unfortunately expired at the end of December. But the whole Biden agenda is about lowering costs for consumers, healthcare, energy costs, childcare, and just the cost of raising a family.
Now, I talked earlier about ExxonMobil's profits. They had in the first quarter of this year, what was it, $9.3 billion in profits, and they, the article went through just how obscene this amount was. I guess 36% profit year to date over last year. I mean, numbers just obscenely out of whack. For me, this is one of those moments where you go, there at some point has to be a windfall profit tax. You cannot take advantage of what's going on with our supply chain, what's going on in Ukraine. You can't. I'm sorry, you can't gouge the American people the way you are, and profit from this. At some point, we've got to dig into their pockets and somehow, I don't know, make them accountable on some level. Or am I off base here?
I think you're totally right. I mean, and I think it's a principle of basic fairness. People should these huge oil companies are just getting a giant windfall, simply because of all the chaos in Russia. And of course, this is the dictator in Russia that the oil industry has supported and propped up. And so we actually at the Center for American Progress are laying out a proposal that we'll have on our website tomorrow. But it proposes a windfall profits tax on the large oil companies. And so the way we do it is basically the higher the price of oil goes, the higher the oil company's tax rate will go. Right. So it's pretty simple. Yep. And the idea is, this is an unexpected windfall. It has to do with global chaos and war and the horrible things that are happening in Russia and Ukraine. These are not deserved profits. And meanwhile, the American people are paying much more at the pump and paying much more, for all sorts of things because the cost of gas, passes through. So we're proposing, propose a tax on the big oil companies. It depends on what the average price of oil is per day. But then, we estimate it could collect something on the order of 25 billion, even if prices are sort of stay where they are now and don't go higher, which is enough to, rebate families around $300. So, and that's what we would do with the, it's not just to tax the oil companies. The whole point is to return those unearned profits to consumers.
Yeah, it's something that we most certainly have to do, and I can't wait to take a look at it. Seth, I appreciate the time and the work that you guys do. Keep up the great work, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Sure, that'd be great.
Good stuff. Seth Hanlon, Senior Fellow of Economics there at the Center for American Progress, americanprogress.org, their website. Going to take a quick break right here. Back with your thoughts, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people have the talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, I'm in favor in a big way of a windfall profit tax on big oil. It's that simple in my view. You should not, under any circumstance, be able to profit from the misery. But again, we look what we do with healthcare. It's crazy. Let's go to the phone lines. got Jim in Chicago on line one. Jim, how are we doing today, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I can't complain. What's on your mind?
All right. I have a comment about your comment about not rooting against Trump. You know, I was never a big Trump supporter. I think he's a scoundrel. I think he's a phony and a criminal. Those are probably his strong points. And it's kind of interesting that when you look at the other side, though, the Republicans, they just wallow in making fun of people, rooting against Joe Biden. If you ever listen to any of their talk shows, the right-wing talk shows, it's name calling Nancy Pelosi, Biden. You know, the New York Times, the New York Slimes, and on and on. It's just disgusting. And I think that kind of what is the big difference between us and them. And a second real quick point about all these sunset rules and wanting to, end Medicare and Social Security. Many Republicans have been talking about this stuff for years. What do they think is going to happen if that should actually ever take hold? We'd end up being like a third world country where we'd have a handful of people that were rich and the rest of us would be peasants. That would be a recipe for disaster. So I'm a new listener and a new caller, but I'd appreciate your thoughts.
I appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for the call, buddy. I look forward to talking to you again. No, I mean, here's where my thought is. And to be honest, they've always wanted to repeal the 20th century. The whole New Deal they've been against from the beginning. Your minimum wage, maximum hour laws, Social Security, Medicare. At every step of the way, it's been about the kind of desperation that you've picked up on. That's what they want. They want people desperate because they believe that's how they're going to make their profits. You look at the things that they push for. They want to move us back towards, as they say all the time, the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s. They want to move us back to the Lochner era, where in the labor market, if you're hungry enough and you're desperate enough, and live in poverty deep enough to work in deplorable conditions for poverty wages, it's your liberty. The old liberty of contract. You want to work 100 hours a week for $1 an hour, that's your liberty to do. Only today they're using the word freedom. We shouldn't have unions fighting for better wages, hours, and conditions because it's your freedom, which is why they're against passing rules to limit how corporate America abuses the gig workers, because it's your freedom to be abused as a gig worker. The same thing with Social Security and Medicare. They are fundamentally opposed to the idea of there being a social safety net under working people's feet because they want us desperate and pliable. It's that simple. And look, as far as Trump, I didn't root against him. I fought against his policies because I thought his policies were bad. But I was not the guy who I hope he fails, because his failure meant all of our failures. I wanted him to succeed in what would move us forward. Sadly, I knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew he was going, and I said this on Inauguration Day, this will be the most criminal enterprise ever. He will commit the most crimes ever. There will be the most people under investigation ever. And look, didn't need a crystal ball, and I undersold. I could not have imagined how bad it was. What we have to do is we have to stand up and forget about the right wing. Forget those people, the people who all about, calling Joe Biden names and Brandon or whatever the heck that is, and move forward on how we're going to make better lives. How are we going to help average, everyday working people lead the best life possible? How are we going to make sure that children get the best opportunities, and my kids, your kids? How are we going to make sure that we build the best communities? I say we change the world, one community at a time. And we lead our best lives. The heck with them. We can't change them. They're lost for now. We need to do the organizing amongst ourselves. We spend too much time fighting them. We need to organize. There are more of us. There are more of us, and we're stronger. We just need to know it. We need to fight for it, and we need to move forward. Appreciate the call, Jim. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of the program, download the podcast. Take the podcast wherever you go. Always there, always available. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that the United Mine Workers of America called for a strike against the Pittston Coal Company. Negotiation with the miners who worked in Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky had drug on for 14 months. The company had canceled health care for retired miners, along with miners with disabilities and widows, and also was not paying previously agreed to payments into a retiree benefit fund. 2,000 miners walked out of the mines and onto the picket lines. The company brought in replacement workers. The union was committed to peaceful protest, but the strike also drew a large number of other miners to the cause who supported the strike in wildcat actions. As many as 40,000 wildcat miners walked the lines in support of the strike. Angered over the use of scab labor, some of these picketers participated in actions like using jack rocks, a line of nails welded together to puncture the tires of company vehicles. In all, 4,000 people were arrested during the strike. The strike stretched on from days to weeks to months. At the time of the strike, current AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka was president of the United Mine Workers. When a newspaper reporter asked him how long the workers could hold out on the strike, he responded, "1 day longer than Pittston." Many friends from labor came to Appalachia to support the strike, including famed farm labor activist Cesar Chavez. A nearby campground became known as Camp Solidarity as a base for these friends. Women supporters formed a group called the Daughters of Mother Jones and staged support actions, including a 36-hour sit-in at the Pittston Coal headquarters. The strike ended in February of 1990, with the miners winning some, but not all, of their demands.
As we know, government ethics can be a very slippery concept. That's why we the people have insisted that every public official, from Congress critters to dog catchers, swear to abide by some minimum standard of proper behavior. Not that all will honor it, but a code of ethics provides a measure of legal action against those who are grabbers and grifters. How bizarre, then, that the 9 members of our august Supreme Court, America's highest legal authority, have discreetly refused to apply ethical rules to themselves, claiming that their group don't need no stinking code because, well, they are supreme. Chief Justice John Roberts himself assures us that each justice will always make the right ethical call because, quote, they are jurists of exceptional integrity and experience. Does he think we have sucker wrappers around our heads? Some of these black-robed honorables regularly engage in petty thievery, taking corporate-funded junkets to luxury resorts, getting free membership in exclusive golf clubs, and accepting assorted gifts from special interests. Clarence Thomas is the current king of handouts, taking thousands of dollars in freebies, including such pedestrian gimmies as car tires and cigars. Thomas, a 31-year lifer on the court, draws $230,000 a year from taxpayers. Can't he buy his own cigars? No one would buy stuff for him except to influence his decisions. Most damning, though, is the grand larceny of the court's 6 right-wing extremists who've turned what's meant to be a citadel of democracy into a Republican rubber stamp for plutocracy. They've stolen the integrity of the court itself, rigging their procedures and rulings to profit moneyed interests, suppress voting rights, hog-tie workers, and generally run roughshod over the needs and democratic ideals of America's majority. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help stop this, go to fixthecourt.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the labor world has changed with the big win at Amazon. And look, as I said from the beginning, I thought if anywhere in the country where that election could go the way it did, it was going to be in New York because of the culture. And if you've been reading some of the stories out there where some of these people are going, look, I had a relative who was a member of this union, and I saw the wages, the benefits, I saw the conditions, I saw that they had a voice on the job, and this is part of why I voted yes. And for me, this is that kind of that snowball, that kind of, once this starts rolling, when the dominoes start falling, that's the message. That message of winning. I'm here to share some thoughts on how historic that win in Staten Island really was. I've asked John Logan to come talk with us. John is a professor out at San Francisco State University and one of my go-to guys when talking about labor, especially when we're talking about, well, Amazon. He's the director of labor and employment studies there at San Francisco State University. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Glad to be on.
So, this is to steal a Joe Biden line. This is a BFD, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yeah. I mean, unions, as you know, they don't win NLRB elections at units this size. There were over 8,000 employees at that warehouse in Staten Island. And then they don't ever win against Amazon. I mean, they've tried multiple times. There've been, efforts by the Communication Workers in America, UFCW, SEIU, RWDSU. No one has succeeded in winning Amazon. And here, there's that fantastic story. An independent Amazon labor union formed less than 2 years ago by two workers that were fired. They were workers in that warehouse. They didn't have any big money behind them. They fundraised through a GoFundMe page. They had a bunch of worker organizers, people who worked in the warehouse. They did have some outside advice. They had some pro bono help. But, it is, it's a cliche, but it's a sort of David versus Goliath story. And the little guy won. And I don't think it would have happened 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, not just the Amazon labor union wouldn't have won, but I don't think any union could have won against Amazon in the context of an NLRB election 2 or 3 years ago. But as you said, something has happened. After 2 years of working through a pandemic on the front lines, those workers at Staten Island knew that they had not been rewarded adequately, that their jobs had gotten worse and more dangerous, and that they weren't being treated with respect. And, they were receptive to the message of the Amazon labor union that said, we're just like you. They spoke with a powerful authenticity because most of them, almost all of them, in fact, were worker organizers. And as you said, a lot of them, had previous union or political experience. There was a very intrepid and fearless group of mostly younger organizers, worker organizers, who a lot of them had been involved maybe with Bernie or with Black Lives Matter or with DSA, things like that. But there's a wonderful firsthand account. It actually might be the best account of the nuts and bolts campaign, an interview with one of the activists. Her first name is Angelica. I apologize, I can't remember her last name, in Jacobin. And as you said, she didn't get involved at first, but after she had a 12-hour shift, she came off, and an organizer was outside, and she said she was 100% in from the get-go. She had never been involved with unions, but her mother had been an 1199 member, and she knew of the benefits and the respect that you get with union membership. And she became an incredibly effective organizer. And because they were worker organizers, they were allowed inside the workplace. And there was a national agreement between Amazon and NLRB back in December. And I think I spoke to you about that before, and it really didn't look like much at the time, we got to say. And Amazon didn't change its behavior. It continued to fire workers, discriminate against workers. But one of the things, relatively unnoticed parts of that national agreement was that it allowed workers to stay around the workplace after their shifts had ended. And this is what they did, according to their first-hand accounts. They took advantage of that, and, as the account said, they spoke to everyone. Yep. And it shows you at Amazon, it shows you at Starbucks. When workers are allowed to speak to each other about union without interference, without intimidation, without bullying from the corporations, overwhelmingly they choose to unionize. And
yeah, John, here. I look at this as, like going back to the old school organizing days. When my grandparents' generation were were organizing. You talked about the Black Lives Matter. You talked about DSA. You talked about a number of ways that younger people are organizing. This is kind of going back to the the 20s and 30s and all the organizing that went on then. That then became the labor movement. Do you think we're reliving that kind of same history?
Yeah, it is similar in some ways. And, obviously in some respects, we're not in a New Deal moment, as you know very well.
Well, not politically, of course, not yet.
Yeah, exactly. We had the Depression, and then we had the political realignment of the New Deal. We had the National Labor Relations Act. All of that opened up an opportunity for unions, and, eventually took a split in the labor movement, but eventually they were able to respond appropriately and take advantage of that opportunity. But you do have some of the same dynamic. If you look at the 36, 37 General Motors Flint sit-down strike, it spread very rapidly, especially in the upper Midwest and on the East Coast, a little bit on the West Coast. But, it didn't spread to all of those places. I'm sure there were CIO organizers, and some of them were leftists and all of the rest of it. And we know that history. But it spread to a lot of places. I'd never seen a labor organizer. They read about it in the newspapers. They saw it in these pate newsreels. They heard about it from their family and friends. And a lot of them started to do it because, well, everyone else was doing it. And, there's a similar dynamic with a lot of these other organizing campaigns. Starbucks, Amazon Labor Union, I would say REI, some of the others too. Over 170 Starbucks stores have now filed for NLRB elections. The overwhelming majority of those stores have never seen a professional union organizer. They're young people talking to each other and being inspired by what happened at Buffalo, where they won their first elections, Seattle, at Mesa, Arizona, and now even in Knoxville, Tennessee, the first Starbucks Workers United victory in the South. And, there's a similar thing, as you said, starting at Amazon. It didn't start on Friday. As you know, organizing Amazon predates even the Amazon Labor Union. But this has given an amazing boost and confidence and energy and enthusiasm. Chris Smalls, who's the president of the Amazon Labor Union, wrote on Twitter today that since their victory, he has been contacted by, I think he said, workers in over 60 Amazon warehouses around the country who want to organize their warehouses, and from several from overseas as well. Yeah. And so it's amazing. It won't necessarily be successful in every one of those, but the traditional labor movement, which like you, I have the greatest respect for. It is why we have some decent jobs and benefits today, but it needs to figure out what it can do in order to encourage and facilitate this type of activity. It doesn't need to take over from these young people. It needs to help them do more of what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with John Logan. John's a professor and director of labor and employment studies at San Francisco State University. We're talking about the massive shift that's going on now in the labor movement thanks to the win at Amazon. And hopefully this will be a massive shift. I'm hoping this isn't just a one-off, John. But, here's the thing. You look at this and you go, okay, you can easily, maybe, say this is a one-off. Okay, they won in New York. Yeah. This may not happen anywhere else. And the other side of this, and the thing that I keep hearing is, okay, you do this in a couple other places. It's not really a huge movement until you get a national strategy, till you get the big money behind it to ensure that these folks win a contract, because ultimately they won an election. Is this going to turn into a contract? And I've yet to find someone who thinks that this really is going to turn into a concrete contract. Do you believe they're going to be able to get that first contract, considering how badly broken our laws are?
Yeah. There's no question that, as you know very well, these big anti-union corporations like Amazon take the view that you haven't really lost until you sign a first contract. So it was bad that they lost the election. They've already filed a complaint, complaining that the election was tainted by objectionable conduct, both by the Amazon Labor Union, but also by the Biden NLRB, if you can believe that. And, they have no chance of proving their case because, the Amazon Labor Union doesn't have coercive power over the workers the way that Amazon does.
Right.
And the Biden NLRB is simply doing its job. And that's what Amazon objects to, the fact that it's actually trying to do its job. The tactic is delay and delay and delay and stall and stall and stall and hope that the workers become discouraged and hope that the pro-union workers leave the workplace and that they just lose hope and that they end up with a lousy contract or maybe no contract at all. But the thing is, this is Amazon and it's not taking place. Normally these things take place in the shadows, as you know, and corporations get away with doing it with breaking the law, with bending the law, with impunity. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen in this case because, Amazon is going to be subjected to intense political and public scrutiny by the NLRB, by politicians at the local and national level, and by the public gaze. This is a company which people have far more direct relationship with than the American public ever did with General Motors or Ford in the 1930s and 1940s. And so, it's the same with Starbucks. The amazing thing about these campaigns is in part the incredible media and social media coverage that they've generated. That's what's gotten people excited. But it's also what's gotten a lot of people to pay attention to the campaigns.
Right.
And, I don't think that, Amazon will just get away with it the way that it's used to. I mean, it already showed during the campaign that they sort of fundamentally underestimated what difference the Amazon Labor Union's campaign made. The fact that these, as you know, they always try and taint the union as an external third party that's going to come between you and the direct relationship you have with your manager. They actually tried that argument in Staten Island, and it was ludicrous because, Amazon Labor Union is a bunch of Amazon employees. It couldn't be less than a third party. And then, some of the old tactics, the anti-union kryptonite that's worked for them every time so far, it didn't work. And in some ways it backfired. Time after time, you had Amazon workers going into these captive audience meetings and challenging the consultants. And, their authority and their legitimacy just crumbled because the workers actually, they were getting advised by union lawyers pro bono, and they realized, we can get fired for refusing to attend these meetings, but if we go in and, we challenge what they're saying, we're actually engaging in protected activity. Now, we might still get fired or disciplined, but, that will immediately result in an unfair labor practice charge. So they went into the meetings, not only the ones that they were supposed to go to, but they went into ones that, they weren't supposed to go to, and they challenged the consultants time and time again. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is only the beginning. But again, as you know, it isn't about the numbers. I mean, 8,000 is the massive bargaining unit, but it's not about the numbers there. And it's certainly not about the numbers at Starbucks. The numbers at an individual Starbucks store are only like 25, 30 employees. It's all about, creating that sort of optimism and excitement and momentum, and getting young people to think, especially everyone, but especially young people to think, we can do that too in our workplace.
No, absolutely, John. I'd rather have them in the position they're in now than having lost the election. They're in a much better place now. But here's the thing. I mean, even the media structure. I saw Jim Cramer on CNBC going on his screed about how we know it's all about the union work rules, and if a company can't tell its employees when to work, then the company's screwed. And, the union's going to be in charge, and it was all about the union. And you just shot that down when you were saying, look, it's the workers. This is their union, and this is what I've been saying for years. This is workplace democracy. This is workers having some say in their conditions, having some say in the place where they work. And yes, maybe sometimes they're going to push back on some of the hours, and maybe they're going to push back on some of the work, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And as you said, because it was worker-led, they could say, as you said, with authenticity, we know what it's like to work in this warehouse and to be disrespected. We're just like you. Amazon has a vision of the future of work that's based on algorithmic management and disposable workers. The churn rate at Amazon is unbelievably high, and low wages, and workers who don't have an independent voice. But if you join with us, we'll make sure that you get respect at the workplace. We'll make sure that you get a voice. We'll make sure that you get decent wages and benefits. And, that message resonated. And I really do think, after 2 years of the pandemic, we're at a different place. Something has fundamentally changed in the labor landscape. And it doesn't mean we don't know what the legacy of it's going to be right now, but it has opened up an opportunity for unions. And, we just got to hope. There's a lot of smart people in unions. We both know that. We just got to hope that, unions are capable of taking advantage of this opportunity, of making the most of it, because it probably won't last forever. Obviously, it's partly to do with the tight labor market as well. No one wants to get fired from their job for participating in a union campaign. But at the moment, at least they have the confidence that they'll be able to get out and get another job, especially if you work somewhere like Starbucks or even at Amazon. We are, having a moment, the landscape has changed as a result of the pandemic, and unions really need to do whatever they can to continue the momentum, to promote, to facilitate, to encourage these types of campaigns, because, there is something very real happening. There's a disconnect, as you know, between, the national trends. Union membership density has been declining for decades now. But then the degree of optimism and energy and enthusiasm that exists within certain parts of the labor movement, and especially amongst young workers, we haven't seen anything like this for decades and decades and decades, and that's real. It can't be quantified in the same way that the union density and membership declining can be quantified, but, it's still very, very real.
Yeah, absolutely. John, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Good stuff. I know we'll be talking again because I'm hoping this is only the first of what will be many Amazon facilities where their workers stand up, step forward, and begin the organizing process. Great stuff, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Good
Pleasure
stuff.
to be on.
Our good friend John Logan, professor and director of labor and employment studies there at San Francisco State University. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. It began what some have called the longest major strike in U.S. labor history. The strike was against Kohler, the Wisconsin-based manufacturer of bathroom fixtures. 2 years before the strike, the workers had formed Local 833 as part of the United Auto Workers. They wanted the right to join the union of their choice, improved wages, and recognition of seniority. When the company refused to bargain in good faith, the members voted to strike. On the first day of the strike, 3,000 workers marched around the plant. Few could have imagined when they walked off the job that many of them would not return for 6 years or even longer. The Kohler Company remained unwilling to negotiate. As the days turned to weeks, then into months, sometimes violence broke out between the scabs and the strikers. But what sustained the strikers was the strong sense of solidarity and community they built together. One pamphlet produced by the union had a picture of a baby on the cover. Above the baby was written, "All my life, my daddy's been on strike to make my future better." Finally, in 1960, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that the company had not followed bargaining laws. It ordered the company to let 1,400 striking workers return to work and to pay back wages. Another 6 years would pass before the issue of payment would be resolved. But in the end, the company had to pay $3 million in back pay and another $1.5 million in pension payments. At the 60-year commemoration of the strike, Local 833 President Dave Bosher declared, "I stand here in awe of the sacrifices of these people." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. And if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Always available, always there for your entertainment, your enjoyment, your information. Make sure you can pass it along to friends. I do always enjoy hearing, hey, my friend gave me this, and first time I'm hearing it, and I love it. Get it all the time. In fact, got a great email yesterday as we debuted on a couple of stations in Wisconsin. Our friends over at the Devil's Radio Network. Mike sent me an email that I thought was really nice, and thank you, Mike. He said, always enlightening to hear you on WCPT, our radio affiliate there in Chicago, but truly special on the Devil's Radio Network in Wisconsin. Brilliant debut, he said. I love that. Thank you. He said, I was so stoked by your verbal genius with Crute in the afternoon that I made a point to drive around the Volrath manufacturing plant in Sheboygan just to honk, hoot, salute the strikers from UAW Local 1472. And a quick shout out to those guys and gals. I wish you the best in your strike one day longer, brothers and sisters. He goes on to say, the gents couldn't know what I was listening to, though. It was cranked. But I got a charge off. They got a charge off my energy, which I got from you. The days when 560, 890, and 1000 WCFL, Chicago's Federation of Labor, were the sound of the 60s and sanity. And tonight you restored a fading faith. Thank you for your quick linguistics. I am going to have to pay closer attention, as your sayings are truly shareable with the many who don't know yet. And thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. Look, at the end of the day, it's all about bringing reality to the masses and where we are. I mean, this Amazon situation, when you listen to someone like Jim Cramer, who all he did on CNBC was bash the workers, and it's all about the evil union. And, when the union gets their work rules in there, remember, rules that were negotiated by the company, agreed to, signed to with the company. It's like they believe that that unions have such enormous power that they can tell companies what to do, and they don't. It shows what they want people to believe. And this is kind of the twisted place that we're in this country. Because these folks, they want you to believe that somehow that's bad. Somehow it's bad. But he finished off his statement by saying one reason Amazon works so well is because people must work when Amazon says people must work. Amazon works because, when Amazon says jump, you better jump. When Amazon says you better do this or that, or pee in the bottles instead of taking a break, or, whatever, you'd better do it or else. And, this is one of those moments where me as a union guy go, no, we should negotiate that. We should discuss under which conditions our labor is being used and for what benefit. And you listen to some of the stories of these workers who, they're working 10, 12, 14 hours a day, especially some of these delivery drivers, and especially some of the quote-unquote gig workers. I mean, we've seen employment in this country get progressively worse for working people as technology has taken over. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. There's a proposed app going around over at Amazon. And from yesterday till today, we now know that this app, this communications app that Amazon has, is being developed. It was reported yesterday that it was actually being used. It's being developed. And they were going to, until it's now been leaked out, they're going to maybe not release it. But a lot of keywords that they had blocked, union being one of them, collective action, pay raise, compensation, harassment, bullying, living wage, a bunch of these terms: grievance, freedom, slave plans, slave labor, restrooms. A lot of these words that they don't want you saying on their app, which is just, well, quite them, and quite the world in which we now live in. And sadly, the more we allow them to do these things to us, the worse things are going to get. I'm telling you, we better stand up, we better fight back, and we better stop taking it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you missed any of today's program, download the app on the smartphone, grab the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.